Did you know that slavery is still prevalent today? Not from the 1600s or even the 1800s, but modern day slavery. And this modern day slavery is sex trafficking. Homeland Security gives us this definition: human trafficking that involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. But sex trafficking is even more than this definition. It is our sisters, our daughters, our brothers, our sons, and our friends. Now, when I worked at Chick-fil-A about 2 years ago, I faced sexual harassment that was physical, mental, and emotionally draining. And this is just a sliver of what these women and men face every day. I want you to imagine a trauma associated with one unwanted sexual encounter and multiply that by 10 times a day. That is what these men and women face. Now, human sex trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world. And the age entry into sex trafficking for females is 15, and for males it is even less. Sex trafficking is present in the world, in Florida, and right in our backyards. Women, children, and teenagers all face and are taken into sex trafficking because of a risk, a trick, or something they've posted on social media. But we can help create this change by loving our children, by educating, and by reporting when we find things are suspicious. We are now going to talk about a couple problems and a couple solutions. The first problem, according to RSW Living, is that these girls in some way in their childhood have faced some kind of neglect or abuse. And if they haven't faced that, their blueprint is very similar. Whether they're being vulnerable, they're having some trouble at home, these men find them and they manipulate that into bringing them into what they want them to do. The number one place that these traffickers find their victims is on social media sites. They look for them, and because social media is so prevalent in our day and age, they can find them relatively easily. Our second problem is that there's not a single form of force, fraud, or coercion. Each pimp or each trafficker or each predator has their own way to get into their lives. They have their own tricks up their sleeves, and they use whatever power or control is required to be able to get them. 85% of victims report developing a close relationship with their trafficker. There are 3 different kinds of traffickers, or pimps, if you will. There's a Romeo pimp, a guerrilla pimp, and a familial trafficker. Now, the first one, a Romeo pimp, as you may have guessed, is a tactic of manipulating their victim to believe that they are truly making a romantic relationship with them. They may buy them gifts, they may take them out for dinner, they do whatever it takes to turn on the charm in the romance to make them feel like they're in a relationship. And in turn, these girls are doing these acts because they feel it is their part in the relationship. And then with that, we have a guerrilla pimp. And they use violence to gain control and power over their victims. They will do whatever they are told based on a fear because they don't know what will happen if they don't comply. And honestly, a Romeo pimp eventually becomes a guerrilla pimp when they gain enough control over them. Lastly, we have a familial tracker. And honestly, this is one of the saddest ones, because this is when a parent or a family member themselves sends their daughter or their son into trafficking to get money, to pay rent, or to buy food, or whatever it may be, unexcusable. And honestly, if you want to read up more or watch about this, there's a movie that is called Caged No More. And it talks about the dad that sends his daughters into sex trafficking for this exact reason. And all of that was according to Guardian Group. The third problem is that these men and women, these pimps, do not see these girls as humans. They don't see them as a human being. They see them as a letter, as a number, as a girl behind a door. But they have a name. And that brings me to another movie if you want to watch. It's She Has a Name. And she does. And then Trafficked is another movie that you can watch to get some information on that. But another way that these men and women do this is they give them statements like, "You are just a whore now. No one will believe you. Your family won't love you anymore. You are the one committing a crime." And any of these phrases that may be used. And once a victim has reached this phase where they truly start believing this, they become autopilot. And they just keep going and going and going because they continue to comply to avoid whatever could happen if they didn't. Some fear tactic, like if they're going to harm their family, or they're going to go kill their loved one, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that, but they feel like they no longer have any worth. And this is the problem. They don't see them as a name, and they have a name. So that brings us to our solutions. The solutions that are going to help us stop these problems. The solution is to educate and report. In high school, my Spanish teacher went to a seminar put on by cops that talked about specifically about this in sex trafficking and what to look for on the humans themselves and also in houses. I want to specifically touch on the houses because I think that this is going to be a prevalent thing to see. You might not always see the girls, but you could see the house like my teacher did. Now these houses are going to have high security. They could have cameras out. They could have some kind of motion sensor. The doors could probably have multiple locks, not just one deadbolt, but maybe a few. The windows will have locks. They would probably have a fence gated in their yard. They could, at least, to keep them in. They also could have bars on the windows. The windows could be boarded up. There's probably going to be minimal ways for you to see into this house because they don't want you seeing anything that you shouldn't. Also, these girls are going to be escorted out by males because they don't want them taking any chance to escape. Also, our second solution is to love. We've seen through the problems that part of the problem is that these girls feel unloved. They feel unwanted. So we need to love our girls. There is not one predator that is the same as the next. Each one has their own trick up their sleeve to manipulate our children to coming to them. But we can be this change. We can create a change in our own backyards and in our world. The Guardian Group says it is estimated that the number of children who are at risk or have already been pulled into the sex trade would fill 1,300 school buses, not one school bus, because one is still too many. One child is still too many. The DCF does provide us with a phone number that we can call if you are suspicious of sex trafficking. You call 1-800-96-ABUSE. Together we can change the world and we can save lives.